The strange part is not that the birds come for the food. The strange part is that some mornings they seem to know you are coming before you even open the door. It usually begins in a way so small, most people never notice it. A cold morning. The kitchen's still dim except for the yellow light above the sink. Coffee brewing, frost holding to the edges of the deck railing. The feeder outside is still almost full from the evening before, and yet there it is. A chickadee already waiting on the same thin maple branch it always uses. Not eating, not searching, waiting. Then the back door opens, and within seconds, the bird drops toward the feeder as if your appearance was part of the schedule all along. Most people assume birds simply react to food. Seed appears, birds arrive, simple cause and effect. But backyard birds are often doing something far more sophisticated than that. Over time, many species begin learning patterns. It's not just where food is, but when it appears. The sound of the screen door, the kitchen light turning on before sunrise, the rhythm of footsteps across the porch. Researchers at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology have documented what scientists call anticipatory behavior in feeder birds, especially in species like chickadees, nuthatches, blue jays, and crows. Instead of wandering randomly until they find food, the birds begin predicting reliable events before they happen. In some studies, feeder birds adjusted their arrival times with surprising precision, sometimes showing up minutes before the same person came outside each morning. And when you think about survival from a bird's perspective, it makes perfect sense. A black-capped chickadee weighs less than half an ounce. During winter, wasting energy can become dangerous fast. Flying branch to branch, searching for uncertain food burns calories they cannot afford to lose. So when a human becomes predictable, the birds learn the pattern, quietly, gradually, morning after morning. That is why some older people who live alone begin noticing something unusual after enough seasons pass. The television turns on, before the neighborhood wakes up, before the newspaper truck rolls through the street, there are already small shapes moving through the yard. Familiar ones. The same cardinal on the fence post, the same dove beneath the feeder, the same chickadee on the maple branch closest to the kitchen window. The birds are not thinking about friendship the way humans do, but stability matters to wild animals more than most people realize. A calm routine, a familiar sound, a person who moves the same way every morning. To a bird, that consistency slowly becomes part of the environment itself. And if you spend enough quiet mornings paying attention, you may begin noticing something else too. The birds are not simply reacting anymore. They are expecting you. But prediction is not recognition. And the next shift is where it starts becoming personal. And if birds in your yard have ever started appearing before you even reached the feeder, I'd love to know what part of the country you're watching from tonight, because some of the patterns people notice in different backyards are honestly remarkable. After a while, you begin noticing something even stranger than the birds arriving early. They do not react to everyone the same way. One morning, your neighbor walks into the yard to drop off a package. The birds disappear almost instantly. The dove beneath the feeder lifts off first. Then the chickadees vanish into the cedar branches. Even the cardinal that usually stays near the fence slips deeper into the shrubs. 10 minutes later, you step outside carrying the same coffee mug you always use, wearing the same faded green jacket, and one of the chickadees comes back before you even reach the feeder. That difference matters more than most people realize, because birds are not simply deciding whether a place is safe. Many of them are constantly deciding which people inside that place feel predictable and which do not. Researchers at the University of Washington became famous for demonstrating this with crows. In one long-term study, scientists wearing specific face masks temporarily captured and released wild crows for research. Years later, the birds still reacted aggressively to the exact same masks while ignoring people wearing different ones. Even more remarkable, younger crows that had never experienced the original event also learned to recognize the threatening faces from older birds nearby. What the studies showed was not emotion in the human sense. It was memory linked to survival. Birds can separate one human from another with far more detail than most people imagine. And it is not only crows. Chickadees, blue jays, robins, and cardinals all show forms of habituation and individual recognition when exposed to stable daily routines. Over time, the birds in a yard begin sorting human behavior into categories. Fast movement, loud movement, calm movement, familiar movement, unknown movement, safe movement. You can often see the shift happening right in front of you if you know what to watch for. At first, a cardinal may land only after a full safety check from the fence, 10 seconds watching. Head turning left and right, another pause before moving closer. But weeks later, that same bird may fly directly from the maple tree to the feeder in one smooth mush motion. The hesitation shortens. The distance closes. The bird stays visible longer before retreating. A chickadee that once exploded into the trees the moment the back door opened may now stay on the lower branches while you refill the feeder only 15 feet away. That is not because the bird suddenly stopped being wild. Wild birds remain cautious every day of their lives. What changes is the risk calculation. Scientists studying prey animals have found that unpredictable movement raises stress hormones dramatically. Sudden motion, unfamiliar objects, loud sounds, even changing the position of a feeder too often can increase alert behavior in backyard birds. To them, consistency lowers uncertainty. A feeder moved 3 feet overnight may not seem important to a person. To a bird, it can temporarily make the entire space feel wrong. The same is true for human behavior. Calm routines reduce stress because they become easier to predict. That is why many experienced birders unknowingly develop small rituals. Same time, same coat, same slow walk across the porch, same gentle movement when pouring seed. And eventually, the birds begin treating that pattern differently from every other movement in the neighborhood. You are no longer unfamiliar motion passing through the yard. You are becoming a known variable inside it. But recognition alone does not create trust. Trust begins when birds stop reacting to your presence as danger. Then one morning, everything changes. Not permanently, just for a moment. But the birds notice immediately. You wake up late. The coffee spills a little as you rush across the kitchen. The back door swings open harder than usual. The screen door snaps shut behind you with a sharp crack that echoes across the frosty yard. And in less than 2 seconds, the feeder empties. The dove explodes upward first. The chickadees disappear into the cedar tree. Even the cardinal near the fence vanishes into the brush, so fast it almost feels like the yard itself pulled inward. 5 minutes earlier, the space felt calm, safe, familiar. Now it feels abandoned. Most people think birds react only to obvious danger. A hawk overhead, a loud engine, a barking dog. But what researchers have learned is far more subtle than that. To prey animals, emotion is movement. A bird does not know whether you are stressed from a bad phone call or simply late for an appointment. It reads the physical signals instead. Fast footsteps, sudden direction changes, shoulders held tight, quick arm movement, loud noise, unpredictability. Those are the things a wild bird has evolved to survive. Deep inside a bird's brain are systems designed to process threat with astonishing speed. Scientists studying avian neurobiology have found that birds possess structures functionally similar to the mammalian amygdala, the part of the brain involved in detecting danger and triggering rapid survival responses. They are constantly scanning for patterns that feel wrong. A sharp movement where there should have been a slow one. Eye contact held too long. A shadow crossing too quickly. A figure moving directly toward them instead of at an angle. In nature, hesitation can be fatal. So birds learn to react first and evaluate later. You can actually see this happening in your own yard if you start paying attention to the tiny moments most people overlook. A chickadee feeding comfortably suddenly freezes when a hand rises too quickly. A mourning dove changes direction the instant someone cuts across the lawn instead of walking the usual path. A feeder that felt active all winter suddenly goes quiet after a ladder appears nearby for house repairs. Even reflective glare in a window can change bird behavior. because flashes of movement and distorted flexions confuse their depth perception. Researchers who study flock alarm systems have documented how fast these reactions spread. One bird startles, then another. Within seconds, the entire yard changes state. The remarkable thing is that many backyard birds are not only reacting to predators themselves, they are reacting to the reactions of other birds. A single alarm call from a chickadee can trigger retreat behavior across multiple species at once, including nuthatches, finches, titmice, and woodpeckers. The whole environment becomes connected through attention. That is why a yard can feel alive one minute and strangely silent the next. And this is where many people accidentally make their backyard harder for birds without realizing it. A feeder placed too far from cover may look beautiful from a kitchen window, but to a bird it feels exposed. Cornell Lab studies have shown that many feeder birds strongly prefer having dense shrubs or evergreen cover within about 10 to 12 feet of a feeding area. Close enough to escape quickly if danger appears, but not so close that predators can hide directly beneath it. Even small adjustments can matter. A brush pile near the edge of the yard, a quiet corner shielded from constant motion, keeping the feeder location stable through winter instead of moving it every few days. These things reduce uncertainty, and for prey animals, reduced uncertainty often means reduced stress. But the deeper truth is not really about feeder placement. It is about atmosphere. Some yards feel restless, others feel steady. Birds know the difference long before humans do. And after enough mornings, many people begin noticing something unexpected in themselves too. The slower they move outside, the calmer the yard becomes. The quieter their presence feels, the longer the birds remain. Morning stops feeling like a task and starts feeling more like participation in a rhythm that was already there before the door opened. To the birds, your yard is not decoration. It is a survival environment. Every branch, every shadow, every sound, every movement gets measured against the question that controls almost every decision a wild bird makes: safe or unsafe, stay or leave. And over time, something even stranger happens. The birds begin building a memory of the entire space around you. A chickadee does not remember your yard the way you remember a photograph. It remembers it as a network of roots. One branch leads safely to the feeder. Another branch gives a clear view of the hawk zone above the neighbor's roof. The cedar tree offers fast cover during winter winds. The left side of the fence is dangerous after sunrise because that is where the neighborhood cat sometimes appears. And the porch railing becomes safer around 7:30 every morning, because that is usually when you step outside carrying seeds instead of moving quickly across the yard. Over time, the birds begin stitching all of these details together into something much more complex than most people realize. Not just memory, a living map. Scientists studying food-catching birds have spent decades trying to understand how advanced this ability really is. Chickadees, for example, hide thousands of seeds across huge areas during colder months and somehow relocate them later with remarkable accuracy. Research on the hippocampus, the part of the brain strongly connected to spatial memory, has shown that food-catching birds often develop enlarged hippocampal regions compared to species that rely less on stored food. Some birds, like Clark's nutcrackers in the western United States, can remember the locations of thousands of hidden seeds for months beneath snow-covered landscapes. And while a backyard chickadee is working on a much smaller scale, the same survival principle exists. The bird is constantly building and updating a spatial memory system. Safe landing points, feeding paths, escape cover, human activity patterns, even changes in sunlight across the yard. That is why the same birds often appear to approach your feeder in nearly identical ways every day. The cardinal lands first on the fence post, then the lower maple branch, then the feeder. The chickadee pauses briefly near the shepherd's hook before darting downward. The mourning dove walks the exact same curved route beneath the feeder each morning, as if following an invisible trail. In many cases, it is, because repetition lowers risk. Familiar routes require less decision-making, And less decision-making means faster survival responses if danger suddenly appears. You begin noticing this most clearly during the changing seasons. In winter, the birds rely more heavily on evergreen cover and stable feeding locations because food becomes harder to find. During spring, the roots expand as nesting activity increases. By late summer, younger birds begin learning the same safe paths from older ones already familiar with the yard. And if the environment remains stable long enough, the birds start treating the space less like a temporary stop and more like a known territory within their daily lives. Sometimes this becomes obvious in surprising ways. A feeder may sit empty for 2 or 3 weeks during migration season. The familiar birds disappear. The yard feels strangely quiet again. Most people assume the relationship is gone. Then, one cold morning, a chickadee suddenly reappears on the exact same maple branch it used all winter long, almost as if no time had passed at all. Not because the bird was emotionally missing a human in the way people sometimes imagine, but because the environment remained recognizable. The roots still worked. The cover was still there. The feeder remained in the same place. The morning rhythm still felt familiar enough to trust. That realism matters. Wild birds are not tiny feathered people having sentimental thoughts about porches and coffee mugs, but they are deeply responsive to stable environments. And when a yard consistently provides safety, predictability, cover, and food, it becomes biologically meaningful in ways that are easy to underestimate from inside the house looking out. You may think you are feeding random birds, but some of them already know exactly where to find you. The same railing, the same branch, the same quiet patch of morning shadow stretching across the porch at sunrise. And eventually, the most important change is not that the birds return. It is how little they fear your presence when they do. And then, one morning, without any announcement at all, you notice the change. Nothing dramatic happened. The sky looks the same. The feeder sways lightly in the cold air. The coffee is still warm in your hands. But the yard feels different now. You open the back door, and the mourning dove beneath the feeder does not immediately fly away. A chickadee stays on the lower branch instead of jumping higher into the maple tree. The cardinal near the fence still watches you carefully, but the long hesitation is gone. No full safety scan, no instant retreat. Just a quick look, then back to feeding. It is a small thing, easy to miss if you are not paying attention. But in the life of a wild bird, it means something important. Wild birds do not casually relax around danger. Every day, they survive by noticing the smallest wrong movement before it becomes a threat. Their entire nervous system is built around caution, which means when fear decreases, even slightly, it usually happens for a reason. Not because the birds became tame, not because they suddenly trust the world, but because over time your presence stopped creating uncertainty. That familiarity gets earned slowly, morning after morning. Same footsteps, same routine, same calm movement near the feeder. You never trained the birds the way people train pets. You never controlled them. The birds still leave when hawks pass overhead. They still disappear during storms. They still keep distance when something feels wrong. They remain wild in every important sense, but consistency changes the equation. It lowers stress. It creates predictability. And eventually, for some birds, predictability begins to feel safe enough to stay visible a little longer. I do not think birds see us the way humans see each other. And I do not think every bird at a feeder forms some deep emotional bond with the people who feed them. But after enough quiet mornings, it becomes difficult to ignore that some of them begin treating certain people differently. You see it in the lowered hesitation, the calmer movements, the familiar routes returning with the seasons, the same small shapes appearing before sunrise in the exact places you have learned to look for them. And maybe that is the real reward hidden inside all of this. Not ownership, not control. Just the quiet realization that a wild creature has slowly decided your presence belongs inside the normal rhythm of its world. The feeder clicks softly as fresh seed falls into the tray. Winter light stretches across the porch railing. And already, before the sun fully rises, a familiar chickadee is waiting on the same maple branch again. Have you ever noticed one bird returning before you even reached the feeder?